Yo, what is up, my friends? Welcome to another episode of Dostcast. मेरा नाम है विनम्र कसाना. If you're new to our YouTube channel, please subscribe because we release new episodes every Tuesday and Friday at 12 p.m. Indian Standard Time. अगर आप इस पॉडकास्ट को किसी ऑडियो प्लेटफॉर्म पर सुन रहे हैं, make sure you give us 5 सितारे क्योंकि मैं भारत में सबसे निराले. आज के हमारे गेस्ट को इंट्रोडक्शन की जरूरत नहीं, पर मैं फिर भी दे देता हूँ because everyone knows who Devdutt Patnaik is. Clearly, he's the foremost authority on mythology in India. I think if there are 3 people who've made mythology accessible to India, he is definitely one of them. मेरे को ऐसा लगता है कि विकिपीडिया पे बढ़िया बातें लिखी हुई हैं इनके बारे में, तो वहीं से पढ़ लेता हूँ. Devdutt Patnaik is a mythologist from Mumbai. He's also a speaker, illustrator, and author on Hindu sacred lore, legends, folklore, fables, and parables. His work focuses largely on the areas of religion, mythology, and management. You obviously know of his fame from the book My Gita and several other books. And now his new book, which is my personal favorite, Garuda Puran, and other Hindu ideas based on death, rebirth, and mortality is out now. And हम लोगों ने इस किताब में बात करी. We talked about the origin story of Yamraj. We talked about how Hindus try to avoid death. We talked about problems learning comparative religion, and we talked about the reality of stories. बहुत ही A1 लेवल की कॉन्वर्सेशन, आपको मजे आ जाएंगे. छोटा सा कैवियाट ये है कि इस वाली कॉन्वर्सेशन में particularly my Zoom glitched a little bit. So every now and then there might be a slight hiccup in the speech from my end because my camera and my mic were acting super weird. I apologize for that. If you can look past that, this conversation is a banger, which I truly think will make you question what do you feel about the dead. The episode with Devdutt Patnaik begins in 3, 2, 1. What is up, Devdutt? Thank you so much for being on the show. Your book has come out in Pitru Paksha. मुझे idea भी नहीं था कि Pitru Paksha चल रहा है. Then a friend of mine told me we're in Pitru Paksha, and then your book came out. I thought that's a happy coincidence. Now, I've always been taught to remember my ancestors, but I've been taught in a very abstract way, one that doesn't often have some rituals attached to it, right? I know Pitru Paksha ke end pe they do something, but I would like to know during Pitru Paksha and are there any? I mean, there's a bunch that you write in the book, but are there any things that people can do in this period right now and even afterward to remember their ancestors?
See, rituals are not compulsory. These are ideas that people have been doing for thousands of years. And in India, many people do this. So many people perform these rituals. So it's not mandatory that you have to do it. It's about your belief. If you believe it, you do it. If you don't believe it, you don't do it. Rituals are only as powerful as much your belief is. It's like we don't realize a birthday party is a ritual, right? It's not scientific. It's not, you just do it because everybody else is doing it. You don't know why you do it. Why do you bring a cake? Why do you put candles on it? Why do you light it? But अच्छा लगता है. You feel good. So you do that ritual or, फिर लगता है कि birthday हुआ है. There is a birthday. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you don't get a greeting card, you don't do any of those things, you somehow feel birthday nahi hua hai. In the same way, Shraddh is a ritual which has been traditionally done in India, recorded history about 3,000 years in this time. So this is basically, what is this time? You should always, rituals are related to time. So this is the time when the days are getting shorter, right? And you're moving towards winter. So that's what is happening. If you look at how from summer, we go towards winter. And as we're going towards winter in India, the rainy season comes. So this is Chaturmas. This is a very heavy rainy season. And during the rainy season, traditionally in India, people would not travel. It was very dangerous to travel. So they would always sit at one place. So across India, you have these rituals. Ek hi ghar mein raho. And then what do you do when you're at home? You do various rituals. You remember gods, you remember ancestors. And one of those rituals is Pitru Paksh. So जैसे गणेश चतुर्थी था 10 दिन का, उसके बाद पितृपक्ष आएगा, उसके बाद नवरात्र आएगा. So between Ganesha and the goddess festivals, there is this 15 days called Pitrapaksh, where it is said the ancestors come to visit humans on earth from their land, the land of ancestors, and you have to feed them. And there is a ritual known as Tarpan, where you give food to your ancestors. This giving food is a very important ritual in India. भगवान को जैसे हम नैवेद्य भोग चढ़ाते हैं, you give food to the deities. It's a very Hindu practice. You feed the gods and you feed the ancestors the same way. But the way you feed your ancestors is very different from the way you feed the gods. When you're feeding the gods, you look in the eastern direction towards the rising sun, and you offer food over the right hand, and the water flows over your 4 fingers. When you are offering food to your ancestors, you look in the southern direction and the water flows over the thumb, not the four fingers, but the thumb. And that is called tarpan. And that is the ritual which is performed at this time. If you especially go to Banaras or any river body, wherever there is a river flowing, you will find these rituals being performed by many people, especially if there is someone recently who died in the family. So that's when they usually do it. And they do it every year, not only for their family members who passed on, but also for all the ancestors of the world, everyone who is dead. This is offering for Vishwapitra, everybody in the world who has died, we remember them, and it is related to the idea of rebirth. कि देखो आप वापस आने हो, we have not forgotten you, we will ensure your rebirth. This rebirth idea is very important जब हम पितृपक्ष के बारे में बात करते हैं.
Why do they face the south? Because the south is associated with Yama. Is that why?
Yeah. So in the traditional direction way, in all traditions, directions are given a lot of importance. For example, in amongst Muslims, when you are performing the namaz, you are supposed to face the direction of Mecca.
Correct.
The directions play a very important role. So in the same way, east facing is where the gods are. East is where the gods are. South is where the ancestors are. And this has been from Rig Vedic rituals, we find this. So at least 3,000 years old.
किताब के अंदर पहला जो पेज था उसी के ऊपर लिखा हुआ था कि Hindus tend to have a very ambiguous relationship with the dead. And it's funny that you mentioned no contracts are signed. I've been trying to sign a few things. It's just getting delayed. And when I read the first page, I was like, case in point, right? So in the end, you often talk about how people integrate themselves with the idea of death later on at the end of the book. पर उससे पहले, even how we consider the anti-clockwise direction with ancestors, why the ambiguity around death? Because if you look at some of the Abrahamic faiths, it's pretty clear, like death hai, to वहाँ पे ये, why is there uncertainty, ambiguity, and even fear around death?
So death as an idea is there in every culture, and every culture responds to it differently. So if you look at it from a evolutionary point of view, if you ask archaeologist, when do you know that ये जो आपको जो fossils मिले हैं जानवर के हैं या मनुष्य के हैं? How do you know it is not an animal and a human being? One of the indicators is that the dead body is buried carefully. So the careful burial of the dead is an indicator of human beings, because human beings have an idea of what is life, what is death, इसका purpose क्या है, death के बाद होता क्या है. Question जानवर नहीं पूछता है, मनुष्य पूछता है. Now you find two very big ideas emerging in the world. One idea emerges around the Middle East and one idea emerges in South Asia. तो मिडिल ईस्ट और साउथ एशिया के बीच में बहुत अंतर है इन टर्म्स ऑफ मिथोलॉजीज. मिडिल ईस्ट में जो आइडियाज निकलती है कि यू लिव ओनली वंस, एक ही जिंदगी है, यू हैव टू लिव इट करेक्टली, एंड एट द एंड ऑफ इट तुम्हारा एक जजमेंट होगा, and either you will go to heaven or hell. Now this idea is not just Islamic, it is not just Christian, it is not just Jewish, it is also Zoroastrian, and even before that in Sumerian, Assyrian culture you find these ideas. So it's not something, even ancient Egypt is based on this idea. ये जो judgment का जो idea है, क़यामत का जो idea है, you can trace it right up to ancient Egypt, where the heart is weighed against a feather, a special feather. तो आपका जो हृदय होता है, दिल होता है, it is actually weighed against a feather of right behavior. तो ये concept is a very...
This is with the Sumerians?
These were the Egyptians. So the Egyptian के art में आपने, if you know, since you have a young audience, they would have been playing these video games with gods of Egypt, and they would have familiar with gods like Thoth, who is a ibis-headed god, or you know, these kind of gods are there, and they measure the heart of the dead. So this idea of one life, you have to live it correctly, and if you lived it correctly, you will go to a good place. If you have lived it in a wrong way, you'll go to a bad place. ये Middle East से idea आता है. South Asia में idea आता है कि देखो ये you live not once, you live many lives. In every life is determined by your actions of your previous life. So you are going through a cycle of rebirths, right? So it's a very different approach to life. So ये खत्म नहीं हो जाता, ये चलता रहता है. शुरुआत, you come with debts. So now the concept of debt emerges. You come with debts, you go with debts. And why were you born in a particular family? Why was I born in a different family? ये आंसर दुनिया में नहीं मिलता है. तो इन्होंने एक आंसर दे दिया कि देखो ये तुमने जो एक्शंस किए हैं प्रीवियस लाइफ में, that has decided your fate. And that is how the Indian model works in this way. I'm using India for South Asia, and I'm
Mhm.
using return for the Abrahamic faith. This geography is a better way of understanding these connections.
Yeah, when you say that, I'm on page 25 of the book. There is a huge list of sample of crimes and suffering in next life. तो मतलब आ तो रहे हैं अगली लाइफ के अंदर, but just the gory depictions. I was wondering if you can comment on this. अगर किसी ने, if someone has killed a fetus, he will be born diseased. If someone has a sexual deviant, he's going to be born a eunuch. Gossip monger, deaf. Thief, poor. Steals food, rat. Steals grain, locust. Educated who does not teach, bull. Where do these descriptions come from?
ये तो बहुत ही शॉर्ट लिस्ट है. दिस गोज ऑन टू ऑलमोस्ट 40-50 पेजेस लॉन्ग. तो मैंने बोला इतना मोटा किताब नहीं लिखना है. आई एम जस्ट गिविंग अ सैंपल कि किसी ने लिखा है. ऐसी these things were written somewhere around the Garud Puran is roughly 900 1000 years old, but you have these ideas even before that. So about 2000 साल पहले, when India में the state became very important as a keeper of law and order, and the moment the state became, तो राजा के दरबार में एक लीगल सिस्टम आने लगा. तो उसी समय हम religious scriptures में we start finding these books which are telling that you'll be punished if you do something wrong, and a kind of a moral code is being created which is linked to Yamraj. So Yamraj is linked to legal matters, Yamraj is linked to financial matters, Yamraj is linked to royal matters. So the god of death becomes that, and they list this कि ये सब बुरे काम है और इसका एक परिणाम होगा. So they're trying to explain karma in a way. They're trying to explain, and they're trying to deal with it. Because see, the Upanishads, when you read the older Upanishads, which are over 2500 years old, वो बहुत abstract है, बहुत abstract है, और साधारण आदमी को समझ में नहीं आता है ये कि एक्शन, रिएक्शन, कर्म का फल, ये बहुत ही थियोरेटिकल लगता है. तो ये बहुत प्रैक्टिकल लगता है. देखो, तुमने ऐसे किया, तुमको ऐसे होगा. Why am I born with a cleft lip? Why am I born with a broken limb? Why do I have bad luck in my life? Why do things go wrong? तो आपको एक्सप्लेनेशन चाहिए. अभी किसी के पास एक्सप्लेनेशन है नहीं, तो अभी इन्होंने एक एक्सप्लेनेशन बना दिया कि देखो, तुम्हारे प्रीवियस लाइफ में तुमने ऐसे किया होगा, तो इस जन्म में ऐसे मत. That's an explanation. Somebody else will give a different explanation कि it's God's will. Somebody will say devil's workshop. तो अलग अलग explanation दुनिया में होते हैं, because we want explanations कि भैया, why are my parents like this? Why are they not as nice? Why are my, वो सब answers. Why do I don't get a good girlfriend? Why do I get bad girlfriends? Why is my boyfriend a jerk and her boyfriend is good? So explanation नहीं मिलता है life में.
Correct.
We find these explanation in these holy books.
जो so about the specificity of Yamraj, कि कैसे, can we say that as royal kingdoms, like you said, developed, as a state develop हुई, तो some gods acquire more and more complicated roles? इससे पहले what was his role like? Was he maybe not as well defined in our scriptures?
So Yama is associated with death right from Rig Veda. In fact, Yama has a very interesting history. If you want, depending on how much you want to know.
Please, let's dive in. He's the god of death. We should do his due diligence.
So if you go to the Zoroastrian traditions, which thrived in Iran, Yama is the god of the living. He's the first god, like Adam. He's the first human being who lived, and he's saved all creatures from a great storm. So he's associated with life. But in India, the story is he's associated with, he's the first man to die. Now, what is interesting is, why am I mentioning the Zoroastrians, is that the Zoroastrian tradition comes from Eastern Iran, and these two traditions come to the very famous Aryan people. And the Aryan people perhaps lived for a very long time in Central Asia, where we are fairly confident. And from there, they divided into these two groups, and these two groups had very opposite views, which is remarkable. When you read the Zoroastrian Avesta and you compare it with the Rig Veda of the Hindus, you find totally different ideas. One speaks of one life. So the Zoroastrians speak of one life, one God, and their first human is Yima, not Yama, Yima, Y-I-M-A.
Mm-hmm.
In India, you have this, in the Rig Veda, it's not very clear, but there's a suggestion of multiple lives, multiple existences, and the first human to die is Yama, Y-A-M-A. And he dies childless. Uska bacche nahi hote hain. He dies because he's the only human being, and he's with his sister, whose name is Yami, and she says we are the only humans. Just Adam and Eve hote hain. So if we don't have relationships with each other, हमारे बच्चे नहीं होंगे, we won't have children. And यम कहता है कि ये ठीक नहीं है because we are brother and sister. And therefore he refuses to have a relationship with her and he dies. और उसका कोई, he has no living relative on earth. And because he has no living relative on earth, he can never come out of the land of the dead. He is forever going to be in the land of the dead. So he becomes the lord of the dead and the ruler of the region of the dead. So ये जो wherever dead people go, there Yama is waiting for them. So he's the first person there. That's the original oldest story that we have. And he meant, then over time the story emerges that he becomes the god of death. He's the cause of death. He's fair in the sense he doesn't make a difference. आप राजा हो, रंग हो, कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. At the time of death, he will come and take your life. And he doesn't differentiate between the rich and the poor, good and the bad, saint and the sinner. So लोगों ने कहा कि ये धर्मराज है. Because a good king nepotism नहीं करता है. You know, he is fair. तो ये फेयरनेस का आइडिया यमराज से जुड़ा हुआ है कि he doesn't differentiate. वो सिर्फ अपना बही खाता देखते हैं. See what kind of life, when are you supposed to die? उस समय he will come and kill you. So that idea of justice in India comes from यमराज. इसलिए महाभारत में युधिष्ठिर के पिता को यमराज कहा जाता है और कहते हैं कि वो धर्मराज है. This is where the word dharma starts appearing. After some time, he starts getting associated with the idea of punishment, which was not there originally. कि धर्मराज दंडराज बन जाते हैं. दंड means punishment and telling people to do good, and if you don't do good things, so now this whole idea of naraka and multiple hells start to emerge. अलग-अलग punishments. अगर you've not treated your wife properly, you've not treated your parents properly, you've not treated your guests properly, you've not treated your customers properly, you've not treated your friends properly, you have been rude and obnoxious, all kinds of नरक की शुरुआत हो जाती है. उसके बाद एक और फेज आता है कि न्यू कैरेक्टर इमर्जेस समवेयर अबाउट 700-800 years ago called Chitragupta, who is the account keeper, who maintains a record of your karmas. And this idea becomes very popular in India because at that time writing became very popular in India and a whole community of kayasts emerged. In North India, in South India, this whole bookkeeping became very important. And the god of the kayasts was Chitragupta, who was the keeper of accounts of the dead, who was linked to Yamraj. So you suddenly see how this character Yama emerges and transforms over time.
Wonderful. I had no idea. I just always assumed him to be the god with the seeing wali jo wo hoti hai, and that's it. Like I saw him as a very one-dimensional being. I have a question though. If he was
before you finish, there is not a single traditional artwork where he has seeing.
Yeah,
ये सिर्फ बॉलीवुड का क्रिएशन है. ये
हमारी
because वो भैंस के साथ उसको जोड़ दिए हैं, and we are in our head. Even now I see many demons are supposed to have these horns. This idea of demons having horns comes to us from Middle East. It is not an Indian idea.
Really?
Mahishasur is an asura who is a buffalo. इसलिए उसको शिंग दिखाई देता है. But this idea of demons having horns is an idea which comes from the Middle East. It even goes to Europe. And Europe में Vikings को उन्होंने horns दिया. Vikings के पास कभी horns नहीं थे. Vikings, ये सब ideas जो Hagar the Horrible में दिखाते हैं ना, it emerged in the 19th century. This idea of barbarians having horns. But in Iran, even in the 500 years ago, if you see the artworks, they would always show demonic monsters with horns. But the idea comes from the Middle East, spreads to Europe, and then reaches India via the colonial forces. तो आज भी लोग जब असुरों को दिखाना चाहते हैं, तो उनको horns दिखाते हैं.
I'm so surprised क्योंकि मैंने पूरी जिंदगी यही assume करा. इनफैक्ट आप पॉपुलर डिपिक्शंस भी देख लो मंदिरों के अंदर भी जाके, तो असुरों के वही होते हैं और ऐसे दांत भी ऐसे वाले होते हैं. In your own research, have you come across like असुर, दानव, दैत्य, ये बहुत सारे multiple ऐसे bad entities, for the lack of a better word? What do they actually, are there visual depictions in the books that are also different from जैसे हम उन्हें actually देखते हैं अब?
नहीं, अभी देखिए, you can just do a simple search. You will hear of a character called Narasimha. तो मेरी एक किताब है 7 Secrets of Vishnu where I talk about Narasimha avatar. और नरसिम्हा अवतार is a half man half lion. और वो एक असुर हिरण्यकश्यपु को मारते हैं. अभी हिरण्यकश्यपु को असुर कहा गया है. उनके बेटा प्रहलाद भी असुर है. अभी उसका पोस्टर देखिए, उसका आड़ी पे भी गूगल कर लीजिए. आप देखोगे कि वो जो असुर है उसको बड़े बड़े मूंछ दिए जाएंगे, उसको काला रंग दिया जाएगा, उसको दे मेक हिम लुक वेरी वियर्ड, डिफॉर्म्ड, बिग मुस्टाश, ugly, but his son will be shown as very fair and very pretty. So in our heads, bad people are ugly, good people are good looking. इसलिए आर्टिस्ट भी ऐसे बनाता है. अभी लाइफ में हमको पता है ऐसे नहीं होता है. गुड लुकिंग पर्सन कैन बी अ जर्क एंड नॉट अ वेरी गुड लुकिंग पर्सन कैन बी ए वेरी नाइस पर्सन. बट आर्टिस्ट के दिमाग में वो ऐसे मूर्ति बनाता है कि अगर आपको लगता है कि आई वांट टू शो हिम बहुत ही भयानक, बट ये जो है ये हमारे दिमाग में जो गेम खेलता है, तो आर्ट में भी ऐसे निकलता है. यू स्टार्ट लुकिंग एट गॉड्स द वे यू इमेजिन लाइफ. इफ यू फील अगली पीपल, जैसे अमर चित्र कथा बहुत फेमस है, लेकिन इसकी क्रिटिसाइज हुई है, बहुत लोगों ने क्रिटिसाइज किया कि हमेशा आपने हमको काला रंग क्यों दिया है. इट इज रेशियल, इट इज अ रेशियल कॉन्सेप्ट. आजकल के जमाने में तो इट विल बी बैंड इन अमेरिकन स्कूल्स में, तो वो तो थोड़ा ज्यादा ही होता है वहां पे. बट जनरली दिस दैट डार्क कॉम्प्लेक्शन इज इक्वल टू असुरास इज एन आइडिया विच हैज परपेट्रेटेड एंड एंटर्ड इंडियन माइंड. लेकिन हम कृष्ण को भी डार्क कलर देते हैं. तो आजकल देखेंगे टीवी शोज में कृष्ण भी गोरे बन जाते हैं. कृष्ण को भी इवन व्हेन दे सिलेक्टिंग एक्टर्स, दे सिलेक्ट व्हाइट एक्टर्स विद लाइट आईज टू मेक हिम कृष्ण. तो धीरे धीरे वो जो फेयर एंड लवली फिनोमेना हो जाता है कि भगवान सिर्फ गोरे हो सकते हैं, काले नहीं हो सकते. You know, so this whole idea, although the songs are घनश्याम, मैं कृष्ण के जो जितने भी सॉन्ग्स हैं वो कृष्ण अपने आप को डार्क कहते हैं, लेकिन हमारे दिमाग में बैठा हुआ है कि डार्क इज अगली एंड अगली इज डिमन, और ये हम चित्र में दर्शाते हैं.
सो क्या हम बोल सकते हैं कि असुरों की प्रवृत्ति बुरी है, उनके चेहरे बुरे नहीं है? मतलब
देखिए, असुर वो होते हैं जो तुम पसंद नहीं करते हो.
वो इनबॉर्न बुरे नहीं होते.
कोई दुनिया में इनबॉर्न बुरी होता है. ये जो डिवीजन हम बनाते हैं ये इस कहानी में नहीं होता है, ये लोग रीडर के मन में आता है, लेकिन स्टोरीज में कभी ऐसे नहीं बताया गया है. यू विल हैव गुड असुरास एंड बैड असुरास, गुड देवास एंड बैड देवास, गुड नागास एंड बैड नागास. वो हर वैरायटी आपको दिखाई देगा. लेकिन हमको ना दिमाग में इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड टेबल नहीं बनाना है. हमको सिंपल चाहिए कि ये अच्छा है, ये बुरा है, ये अच्छा है, बुरा है. जैसे इंद्र इज गुड, लेकिन जब हम अहल्या की स्टोरी पढ़ते हैं तो अहल्या के साथ इंद्र इज हैविंग, अहल्या इज ए वाइफ ऑफ अ ऋषि कॉल्ड गौतम, एंड वन डे गौतम कम्स टू हिज हाउस एंड फाइंड्स हर इन द आर्म्स ऑफ इंद्र, जो देवताओं का राजा है. अभी देवता हमारे दिमाग में बोले हैं अच्छे हैं, तो ये क्या कर रहे हैं. अभी बच्चा जब पूछता है मम्मी को कि यू नो व्हाई इज इंद्र डूइंग समथिंग व्हिच इज कंसिडर्ड रॉन्ग, हाउ डू यू एक्सप्लेन इट.
No, Indra is famous throughout. वो तो he's very insecure about his throne. Multiple times I've seen it. But I'm just wondering. Okay, so can we place? हम ऐसा कर सकते हैं कि हम देवों का नेचर डिफाइन कर सकते हैं, असुरों का कर सकते हैं. Where do the Nagas come in exactly?
सो नागास के भी अच्छे नाग होते हैं, बुरे नाग होते हैं. तो these are different groups of people or ideas that they're trying to communicate using these forms. You know, they're using these forms. So there is Garud पुराण में गरुड़ और नाग की कहानी होती है. नाग एंड गरुड़ आर एनिमीज ऑफ ईच अदर. नाउ इफ यू लुक एट नेचर, इन नेचर जो ईगल होता है वो सांप से बहुत डरता है, बिकॉज जब वो चाहता है हंटिंग के लिए, एक सांप आके उसके नेस्ट में जाके उसके अंडे को चुरा सकता है. राइट, सो इट इज अफ्रेड कि वो सांप आके मेरा बच्चा को खा जाएगा, उसके अंडे को खा जाएगा, इसलिए वो सांप को खाता है. सो दे आर ए म्यूचुअल एनिमीज. नोबडी इज गुड, नोबडी इज बैड, दे फाइटिंग ईच अदर. ये जो प्रेडेटर प्रे रिलेशनशिप है, अभी हम जब कहानी बताते हैं तो कहानी के हिसाब से हीरो कौन, विलन कौन, बिकॉज वी वांट अ हीरो एंड विलन. बट डिपेंडिंग ऑन द स्टोरी, इफ यू रीड डिफरेंट स्टोरीज, सम स्टोरीज Garuda is the villain, some story Naga is the villain, some stories, so every story is different. अभी ये complexity जो होती है स्टोरी की, आजकल हॉलीवुड हैज डिस्कवर्ड दिस. आजकल के मिनी सीरीज अगर आप देखोगे तो मेनी ऑफ द स्टोरीज दे शो सम आर हीरोज विलेन्स, बट इन इंडियन मिथोलॉजी देयर हैज नेवर बीन अ क्लियर कैरेक्टर, ये अच्छा है, ये बुरा है. दे विल ऑलवेज टॉक अबाउट हाउ people respond to different situations, and there are what makes a good person is someone who even in a negative situation doesn't become negative, who in a positive situation also remains sthita prajna. Wealth doesn't drive him crazy, poverty doesn't drive him crazy, fortune doesn't drive him crazy, and misfortune also doesn't drive him crazy. Both of these things they show, and that is what it keeps saying repeatedly in stories.
So who was Garud then? Why did you decide, Kiar, let's talk about this eagle slash hawk who's the mount of Vishnu? Where did that idea come from?
So, the English translations are a problem because Garud, some people like eagle, बहुत अच्छा लगता है eagle. Some people say it's a hawk, cheel. Yeah, some people say it is a falcon. Why? Because it goes and comes back. So only a falcon can go and come back. You can't do that with a eagle, right? Eagle is wild.
Yeah, that's why you hear the words trained falcon.
Yeah, trained falcon. So ये क्या है? ये so first of all, गरुड़ पुराण था नाम. So I said गरुड़ पुराण क्यों बोला गया है? It's very unusual title for this book. Why is it called? The simple explanation is Vishnu is telling Garud about life. ये कॉन्वर्सेशन है विष्णु और गरुड़ के बीच में. गरुड़ आके ऋषियों को बताए थे, इसलिए हमारे पास गरुड़ से आया है, तो इसलिए हम इसको गरुड़ पुराण कहते हैं. बट आई डिसाइडेड टू गो लिटिल बिट मोर इनटू द लाइफ ऑफ गरुड़. और उसकी जो इमेजरी है, बहुत ही ड्रामेटिक इमेजरी होते हैं कि हाथ में ही इज होल्डिंग स्नेक्स इन हिज हैंड, ही इज होल्डिंग एन एलिफेंट इन वन क्लॉ, ही इज होल्डिंग अ टर्टल इन अनदर क्लॉ, ही इज होल्डिंग अ ब्रांच with dead bodies hanging upside down. So you find these very, very dramatic images associated with Garud. So मैंने कहा कि इनकी स्टोरी बताते हैं. And then as I went deeper into the story, I realized, oh, this is also a reason why he's associated with Garud Puran, because his story is about life and death. He goes to the worlds where no one has gone, like Star Trek. He goes everywhere. तो गरुड़ की जो कहानी है वो वेदों से आती है. There is in the Vedas there is a repeated mention of a bird that travels up the mountain to get a sacred product called som and bring it back from the gods to humans. ये जो theme है, it's a recurring theme in the Vedas, which in the Garud Puran becomes the story of a magical bird which travels to another land, and discovers things. He discovers, he's born into slavery. His mother is a slave. He wants to, who is a slave? She's a slave of snakes. And then he realizes his mother and his aunt are really sisters. And they are the wives of a rishi called Kashyapa. So in effect, the snakes who have enslaved his mother and who are his enemies are actually his cousins, his own cousins, or his co-brothers, you can say. And so his enemy is actually his relative who is torturing him out of his own insecurity. And then he wants his mother's freedom. And therefore he goes to the realm of the gods to get Amrit. But he gets his mother out of the slavery, but does not give the Amrit to the snakes because he doesn't like the snakes. He tricks them. तो वो छल करता है. और वो छल से अपने माँ को लिबरेशन देता है, लेकिन नागों को अमृत नहीं देता. But what he does is he keeps the pot on the earth, and the story is interesting because the snakes are able to regenerate themselves. They never grow old. They can shed their old skin and they can get a new skin. So now you suddenly start seeing ideas of regeneration, rejuvenation, rebirth, immortality. All these stories are linked to Garud. तो गरुड़ की कहानी में हम जीवन के बारे में सुनते हैं, डेथ के बारे में सुनते हैं, रीजेनरेशन के बारे में, which is called संजीवनी. We hear about immortality, which is Amrit. We hear about rejuvenation or Som का concept, the moon. And suddenly lots of ideas sort of get associated with Garud. And I thought that makes it very interesting कि कैसे एक ही माध्यम से वो अलग-अलग बातें समझाना चाहते हैं.
One of my favorite gods, also one of my the most problematic gods, Indra. He loves Somras, right? His whole thing is he takes Somras and starts dancing. And Somras has been mentioned multiple. And there are also literal channels and organizations with the names of Soma and such. What is Somras, and is it, say, different from Amrit? Somras has been mentioned consistently across many scriptures. What do you think about it in general? And can we as modern peoples find it? Sorry, yeah, go on.
No. So Soma, again, you have to look at it historically. That's the easiest way to do it. It's not what
Okay.
Devdutt thinks. It is what the books are informing us. One has to be very careful with words, because words have a long history and they change over time. The meaning changes over time. So today when I say Somvar or Monday, I am referring to Som with the moon.
Okay.
Right? Somvar hai. So Somavansh, the lunar dynasty. So the moon is associated with Som. Now, what is special about this moon? It waxes and wanes. So waxing and waning, it becomes a symbol of rebirth. कि आपका जन्म होता है, you grow up, you grow and you die, and then you are reborn, and then again you grow up and you grow old. So just as the moon waxes and wanes, you and I will also wax and wane. Nature also waxes and wane. So now you get an idea कि अरे अच्छा, तो शायद सोम का relationship is to deal with regeneration. This rebirth ka phenomena. Now we go deeper and deeper, and we realize the word Soma is a very important idea in Rig Veda. And they always say that Rig Veda mein, the whole purpose of Rig Veda is to call the gods and give them Soma, the drink of Soma. In fact, Rig Veda is a set of 1,000 poetries, for those who are not aware of it. It's not that itna exotic nahi hai, wo Google karke mil jayega aapko. There are 1,000 poetries divided into 10 chapters called mandalas. And the 9th chapter only deals with Soma. And basically it says Soma is a herb, a plant, जिसको वो क्रश करके एक जूस बनाते हैं. जूस को वो फिल्टर करते हैं, और वो फिल्टर करके, that filter is called pavitra. So that is why even today we say when pavitra is to purify. तो प्यूरिफिकेशन का एक फिल्टर होता है, और उससे जो इट्स ऑलमोस्ट लाइक मेकिंग कॉफी. यू एक क्रश करो उसको, फिर उसके बाद उसको यू फिल्टर करो. फिल्टर करने के बाद उसको मिल्क या पानी के साथ मिक्स करके यू ड्रिंक इट, एंड व्हेन यू ड्रिंक इट यू गेट हाईली एनर्जाइज्ड. तो आपकी जो थकान मिट जाती है. सो इट ऑलमोस्ट साउंड्स लाइक चाय. It almost sounds like coffee. Of course, if you want to believe that हमारे tradition में सब nuclear weapons थे और spacecraft था, then you will say कि ये नहीं, ये mystical drug था जो आपको दुनिया की सैर कराता था. ये सब magical बातें होती है. But basically, Soma just means something that uplifts you. It is probably related. The plant has been identified now as called ephedra. Ephedra is a plant that is found in the Central Asian regions, north of Kashmir. तो उसको Pamir Plateau जिसको कहते हैं. That mountain region has a lot of plants, and the description matches exactly which is found in the Rig Veda. Stalks without leaves, fragrant smell, and golden liquid when crushed. So these are all descriptions of it, always found on a mountain, not found in the plains. And it is supposed to be this ephedra plant. An ephedra plant, if you have heard of this word adrenaline.
Yes.
So adrenaline, the technical, another word for it is ephedrine. Ephedrine is, तो adrenaline rush जो बोलते हैं, is what Soma would cause. तो जब आप जॉगिंग करते हो, एक्सरसाइज करते हो, एंड गो टू द जिम एंड यू फील दिस बर्स्ट ऑफ एनर्जी, बोलते हैं कि एड्रेनलिन अभी फ्लो हो रहा है, या स्पोर्ट्स करते हो, ये जो एनर्जी एग्जैक्टली दैट सोम वुड गिव. तो आपको थकान जब होती है तो आपका राइज होता है. सो दैट वाज सोमरस, एंड दैट इज व्हाट द आर्यस लव्ड. दे रियली रियली लव्ड दिस. इट इज कॉल्ड होम इन द ज़ोरोएस्ट्रियन ट्रेडिशन. सो इट्स कॉमन इन इंडिया एंड ईरान. और इसको बट इंडिया में वो धीरे धीरे वो भूल गए, बिकॉज एज दे मूव्ड ईस्टर्न डायरेक्शन, गंगा की तरफ आने लगे, दे डिड नॉट गेट दिस सोम इजीली. It was very difficult to get som from this far away land. तो धीरे धीरे they used substitutes, local substitutes, but उसमें वो मजा नहीं आता था. And धीरे धीरे वो poetry बन गया, फिर वो metaphor बन गया, फिर वो धीरे धीरे उसको, some people thought सोमरस is alcohol, सोमरस पी के वो नाच रहे थे. But basically it was an upper. It is just something that raises your spirits जब आप down होते हो. And then it became the symbol of immortality, and then it became the symbol of regeneration. Moon, ये सब बड़े बड़े लगे, and it became magical. But एक simple है वो, coffee, tea, soma, ephedra.
My whole life has been a lie. I can't believe it. How do you? I have a genuine question, Devdutt. ऐसा कैसे हो जाता है? Like, do you when you research a concept like the Somras or even the Garuda Purana, like how many years back are you going? How many sources are you referring to, right? To make sure that you arrive at an understanding that is this concrete and सब लोगों को समझ में भी आए.
See, history पढ़ना पड़ता है. तो initially when I studied mythology, I would only focus on the books that people said this is mythology. और ये मुझे किताब देते थे रामायण. फिर धीरे धीरे मैंने देखा कि अच्छा ये रामायण एक स्टोरी नहीं है. There are many stories. जैसे रीजनल रामायण होता है तो एक geographical division आ गया. Geography like Tamil Ramayana is very different from Odia Ramayana. Odia Ramayana is very different from Gujarati Ramayana. So मैंने पहले वो देखा, अरे ये तो सबको नहीं पता है. जो गुजराती रामायण बोलता है वो उड़िया रामायण में नहीं है, जो रामायण असमीज में है वो पंजाबी में नहीं है, जो पंजाबी में है वो तमिल में नहीं है. सो दैट वाज माय बिग डिस्कवरी एज आई वेंट डीपर इनटू मिथोलॉजी. फिर धीरे धीरे मैंने देखा कि नहीं, ये ज्योग्राफी नहीं, हिस्ट्री भी इंपॉर्टेंट है. समय के साथ स्टोरी बदलता है. Valmiki Ramayana, which is the oldest manuscript that we have, is very different from Tulsi Ramayana. Tulsi is 500 years old, which was written in Awadhi in the Gangetic Plains. While Valmiki Ramayana is the written version that we have today is about 2000 plus years. It may be about 2.5, maybe to 3000 years old. We don't know. But it is a gap है, 1500 साल का gap है. और उसमें बहुत डेल्टा दिखाई देता है. lot of differences are seen. That's how I learned that history is important, geography is important in the study of mythology. कहानी बदलते हैं समय के साथ, geography के साथ, history के साथ. So that's why history became important. And COVID के time I really deeply went into Indian history. And when you are studying Indian history, you have to start with the Stone Age. Then you have to go to the Harappan period. Harappa के बाद Vedic period आता है. उसके बाद the Greek Saka period comes. Then after that you have the Chola period, the Chalukyas of South India, जिसके बारे में हम ज़्यादा नहीं पढ़ते हैं. And then you start seeing stories change over time. कितनी बदलाव आती है. And people have done a lot of work on it. बट वो क्या होता है, स्कॉलर अपने दूसरे स्कॉलर के लिए लिखता है, वो जनरल पब्लिक के लिए नहीं लिखता है. ऑल हिस्टोरियंस राइट फॉर अदर हिस्टोरियंस, ऑल आर्ट हिस्टोरियंस राइट फॉर अदर आर्ट. तो ये जो कॉमन मैन है उसको ये इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं मिलता है. तो मैंने कहा कि अच्छा मैं ये इन्फॉर्मेशन को लेके आई विल मेक इट एक्सेसिबल टू कॉमन मैन. एंड दैट्स हाउ आई बिल्ट माय करियर. सो आई मीन आई जस्ट गो टू अलादीन्स केव और वहां से एक ज्वेल निकाल के दूसरों लोगों को दिखाता हूँ. बोलते हैं अरे आप, but it is there, but you have to know how to present it. Like what I told you about Soma, it is of course years of hard work and reading, which I'm telling you in 3 minutes.
Right.
It's there. This information is there. It's there. You can see these, whatever I've told you, lots of scholars have written on it. Very important is I always check the credentials of the scholar. It's very important कि ये आदमी है कौन जो लिख रहा है सोम के बारे में. अगर उसको मैजिक पसंद है तो मैं उसको सीरियसली नहीं लेता है, because he believes in magic.
Right.
I find that, okay, that's very nice for children and you want to entertain people and all that.
Yeah.
I prefer people with a very strong academic, scientific background because they challenge themselves. You know, the hallmark of a good academician is he wants to prove himself wrong. He doesn't want to prove himself right. He wants to prove himself wrong. And he comes to the last, इधर तक मैं wrong होता हूँ, उसके आगे नहीं wrong हुआ. So then he's able to tell you how to see things. So इनकी scholarship मुझे बहुत पसंद है ऐसे.
When you read scholars, I mean, it's different in say the STEM fields, right? जहाँ पे it is peer reviewed. Like a mythology or like the history of religion. Do you think that there is a possibility still that वहाँ पे scientific method ना use करके, critical thinking ना use करके इंसान अपना personal bias ला सकता है? Like when you said the magic part. And have you seen passages that actually completely rely on personal bias?
See, the difference between STEM and humanities and popular literature. 3 things. STEM mein mathematics are very important. You have to prove it mathematically and you can reproduce it. History mein I can't reproduce history, right? I cannot reproduce history. But peer review has to be there. कि भैया जैसे अगर आपने मैंने कहा कि Somras is found in Central Asian region, I will give you 20,000 texts which say that. ऐसे है ऐसे, उसका फोटो दिखा दूंगा या वेबसाइट में दिखा दूंगा, लिंक दिखा दूंगा, बोलूंगा कि as of now, and I'll always keep holding my thing by saying as of now, as per this data. जब मैं ये नहीं करता हूं और बोलता हूं कि so if a paper is based on doubt, it is scientific. So all the humanities, whether it's economics, politics, is not subjective. They are giving you कि देखो ये इधर तक डेटा है, इसके बाद मेरा ओपिनियन है, यहां तक डेटा है, यहां बाद मेरा ओपिनियन है. तो दैट पार्ट ऑफ डेटा इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. देखो ये 10 चीजें हैं और मैं कुछ प्रूव नहीं कर रहा हूँ, ये पढ़ने से मुझे इतना इतना नॉलेज मेरे को है. एंड ही विल ऑलवेज डू अ व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एन अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ ऑल द अदर स्कॉलर्स हु हैव रिटन ऑन दिस सब्जेक्ट एंड से दिस ओके दिस I agree with this person because of these reasons, I disagree with this person because of these reasons. Now I will present my thesis. अभी क्या होता है, ये इतनी एकेडमिक हैवी होता है कि जनरल पब्लिक से हमको नहीं पढ़ना इतना. हाँ, आप हमें मैगी नूडल्स दे दीजिए जो हम समझ में आए. Now the problem with that is that you now are based on faith. You have to trust the scholar telling you that. तो ये फेथ जब आ जाता है ना, तो फिर वो साइंस से दूर हटने लगता है. That is the big difference between science and religion. Religion is based on vishwas.
Right.
Or science, vigyan, is based on avishwas. And that is something that even I've seen McKinsey ke partners, very big guys in the field, they don't get it. इतना अक्ल नहीं है लोगों के पास कि ये simple division. Are you based on doubt or faith? So, there are people who have told that the pyramids were built by aliens. और उनके वीडियोस मिलियंस में जाते हैं, मिलियंस, सुपर हिट होता है. And they're very, very popular. However, they're not peer reviewed. It's a one-man story. And उसके फैंस होते हैं और सब लोग उसको ताली बजाते हैं और वो एक ग्रुप बन जाता है, कल्ट बन जाता है और वो पॉपुलर है. It is popular. It is great fun to watch these videos, but I will not take them seriously because I'm like, ये peer reviewed नहीं है. But जब मैं pyramids के बारे में, जैसे मैंने Thoth की story बताई and all that, I know people who have gone right to the basis of it, historical evolution of Thoth over 3,000 years of Egyptian history, कैसे सिंबल चेंज हुआ है, पहली बार ये सिंबल कहाँ पे आया, ये हमेशा तो नहीं था, कब बंद हुआ इसका इस्तेमाल होना. All that, there are people who have done a lot of research on it, and I keep reading before I make this one. एक sentence में जो मैं बोलता हूँ उसके पीछे 50 किताबें हैं. So there's a lot of rigor that has to go this. That's why mythology is also a lot of basis of rigor, and I know at what point I bring my bias into it, and I will tell you कि देखो ये मेरा bias है. And I have to tell you, ये मेरा bias है, because this is where many scholars fail. कि देखो, unlike STEM, in technology, by the way, STEM is S and M are objective. T and E have a lot of subjective ideas. Technology will save the world. वो जब लोग बोलने लगते हैं ना कि ये this will save the world, फिर तो आ गया subjectivity. वो बेच रहा है.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah. So all those Bill Gates and all, when they say we are scientific, no. You're not scientific. You are a marketing person. And therefore there is bias because you are so eager to sell your app. You are telling me what I want to hear. That is not a scientist does not care whether you agree with him or not. He'll say, bhaiya, mathematics prove kar raha hai. I don't need to, proton, neutron, even Newton was challenged by Einstein based on data. People took it very personally. The British got very upset. Newton, because see, Newton was a Christian. Newton was English.
Yeah.
Einstein was German.
And a Jew.
And Jewish. So 39 ka aakda. So naturally the ego came into the picture, but science doesn't care. तुम English हो, Christian हो, male हो, तुम्हारा data, Newton's thesis डेटा को सॉल्व नहीं कर रहा है. आइंस्टाइन का थीसिस डेटा प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व कर रहा है. आई डोंट केयर. लेकिन जब हम विश्वास के बारे में बात करेंगे, मैं यमराज के बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ, सोम के बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ, यहाँ पे बायस आ जाती है. इट इज द रेल्म ऑफ सब्जेक्टिविटी. एंड द क्वेश्चन इज हाउ मच सब्जेक्टिविटी. तो मैजिक वाला सब्जेक्टिविटी, बिकॉज नाउ द रीडर इज प्लेइंग अ वेरी एक्टिव रोल. बिकॉज रीडर को अगर मैजिक पसंद है तो वो बोलेगा नहीं, दे सोमरस बहुत ही मैजिकल मिस्टिकल सब्जेक्ट, तो उसको मेरा एक्सप्लेनेशन पसंद नहीं आएगा. वो उनके पास जाएगा जो कहेगा कि सोमरस एक बहुत ही विचित्र ग्रंथ जो हमारे वेदों में लिखा हुआ है एंड नोबडी कैन एवर अंडरस्टैंड इट अदर देन मी. एंड आई विल से नहीं, वो चाय जैसा है. Now that is how they hate you. They hate you to make it so simple. Because
what do you want? Fantasy.
You want fantasy.
Yeah.
You want fantasy. If you want fantasy, then I'm not the person to read.
Yeah. Well, I will still say. So does the ऐसे comparative mythology होती है ना कि जैसे आप और cultures को पढ़ते हो. जैसे I had Ashwin Sanghi on the podcast and he compared the Vedas with the Zoroastrian faith and found many commonalities among like obvious differences. I'm just wondering, when you read mythology from across the world, does it help cement some of the stories that you write? Because, for example, if you find passages of another thing that you mentioned in your books occurring in other cultures, does it help sort of cement it and ground it?
I don't understand what you mean by cement and ground.
In
Matlab
in
kya?
in some kind of reality, does it make it more accessible?
No, stories are not real. By definition, they are not real. You cannot say God is real. You cannot say God is not a scientific concept.
Right.
God is an imagination.
I'm not a person advocating scientific method over that. मैं वो नहीं कह रहा, मैं कह रहा हूँ जैसे comparative mythology पढ़ते हैं तो कि एक स्टोरी के ऊपर आसपास वो उसका एविडेंस, उसकी वेरीफाइबिलिटी बढ़ जाती है. मैं वो पूछने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ.
So it's not verifiability. What it means is that how have imaginations moved over time. So एक आइडिया होता है, मेरे पास एक आइडिया है, आपके पास एक आइडिया है. मेरा आइडिया मैंने आपको दिया, आपने आपका आइडिया मुझे दिया, तो अभी मेरे आइडिया में बदलाव आ गया. शायद, मे बी नॉट. आपके आइडिया में बदलाव आया. देन यू पास इट ऑन टू समवन एल्स. फिर वो आइडिया और बदला, फिर उन्होंने किसी और को दिया. तो धीरे धीरे करके आइडियाज बदलते रहते हैं. एंड दिस हेल्प्स यू अंडरस्टैंड. जैसे यम की कहानी, मैंने कैसे कहा, यम की कहानी है, फिर यम की कहानी है, फिर धर्मराज वाली कहानी है, फिर नरक वाली कहानी है, उसके बाद चित्रगुप्त आए. सो नाउ आई एम सीइंग अ एवोल्यूशन ऑफ थॉट.
राइट.
And then you ask ये evolution हुआ क्यों? Why would it change? What is the purpose of an idea changing? जैसे आजकल हम जब let's look at something contemporary. आजकल जब राम के पोस्टर्स निकलते हैं या शिवजी के पोस्टर निकलते, वो हमेशा हाइपर मस्कुलर होते हैं. मस्कुलर इतना मसल की जिम जाते हैं, पूरा दिन बैठ के जिम करते थे. तो कहां से आया ये? Because it is not there 50 years ago. 50 साल पहले ऐसे पिक्चर्स कहीं नहीं दिखाई दी. मंदिरों में जाओ तो भगवान को मसल्स कभी नहीं दिखाते हैं. हनुमान जी की मूर्ति देखो, वो पहलवान जैसे लगते हैं. एंड इंडियन पहलवान जो अखाड़े में जाता है उसको मसल्स नहीं दिखाई देते. इनफैक्ट ही लुक्स वेरी बिग, लार्ज, like a sumo wrestler. And sumo wrestlers are very strong, but you cannot see the sumo wrestlers muscles because it is covered with a layer of fat.
That is true. Yeah.
But अभी हनुमान को हम इतना मस्कुलर क्यों बना रहे हैं? Look at some of the recent images which are coming and all that. आजकल वो मसल क्यों दे रहे हो तुम? ये मसल तो कभी नहीं था इंडियन आर्ट में, कहीं नहीं. You don't find it in miniature paintings. You don't find it in temples. You don't find it in the murals on the temples. Nothing, कहीं नहीं. सिर्फ last 20 years में. Then you realize, अरे ये तो influence of Marvel comics.
Wow, we project our fantasies onto our gods.
Yes.
Right?
This is a simple way of understanding कि ये है मार्वल कॉमिक्स. तो आजकल जो बहुत आर्टिस्ट मेरे को आते हैं, बोलते हैं जी हमको देखना, आपका आर्ट देखिए. एंड आई लुक एट इट एज ओ यू आर रीडिंग डीसी कॉमिक्स. हाउ डू यू नो दिस? आर्टवर्क में दिखाई देता है. बिकॉज इट इज नॉट ओरिजिनल. यू आर सो इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय डीसी एंड मार्वल. अरे देवी देवता भी ऐसे लगने लगे. एंड नाउ यू से दैट इज रियल. तुम्हारे इसको रेइफिकेशन, तुम्हारी जो विचार है उसको तुमने सच बोल दिया. बट मैं जब राम के मंदिर, I'll show you statues which are 500 years old and the gods don't look like this at all. But you don't like those images because वो ऐसा वो माचो नहीं लग रहा है. वहां पे वो बहुत ही डेलिकेट दिखते हैं, जेंटल दिखते हैं. बिकॉज उस समय का विचार अलग था कि देवी देवता शुड नेवर लुक स्ट्रेस्ड. They should never be angry. Gods are not supposed to be angry because then they're not gods. फिर उनको पूजा क्यों करोगे? Angry gods is an absurd idea in Hinduism. तो लोग बोलेंगे रुद्र रुद्र रुद्र. तो I see people using these words and I'm like, कभी रुद्र word बताओ कहाँ पे पहली बार आया है? And they'll, no, we have read this. I say, show it to me. And then I show the verse to them. अच्छा ट्रांसलेट, संस्कृत नहीं पता है आपको. अच्छा 4 ट्रांसलेटर को पकड़ लो. 4 ट्रांसलेटर, अलग अलग ट्रांसलेटर में कुछ तो कॉमन होगा. ढूंढ लो, बताओ कहाँ पे एंग्री लिखा हुआ है.
He's known as a howler, right? Someone who cries and he's
Yeah, but what does howling mean? You can howl in happiness also, ना? आपने कभी वो बेसबॉल मैच देखा है? When groups are, they'll howl like a wolf.
Right.
Team spirit. Howl doesn't mean anger. You are projecting. This is bias coming in. Howl is howl. Wind is howling. Now, wind is howling doesn't mean wind is angry.
Yeah.
The word Rudra comes from Maruda. Marutta. Marutta is wind. मारुदा, डोंट क्राई, बच्चा रो रहा है, डोंट क्राई, मारुदा मारुदा. सो दीज आर वेरी डिफरेंट ओरिजिन्स. फिर धीरे धीरे करके वो वर्ड का मीनिंग कुछ अलग हो जाता है, फिर शिव जी के साथ जोड़ा जाता है. व्हाई डू यू वांट टू सी शिवा एज एन एंग्री गॉड? द अर्लीस्ट इमेजेस ऑफ शिवा शो हिम एज अ गुड हस्बैंड. अपनी पत्नी के साथ वो ही इज प्लेइंग डाइस, लूडो खेल रहे हैं. अर्लीस्ट इमेज, यू डोंट टेक माय वर्ड फॉर इट.
He's playing Ludo.
लूडो चौसर. पहला इमेज शिवजी का, नॉट इन दिस एंग्री अवतार, ऐसे वैसे करके. वो इवन इन द एंग्री अवतार, इफ यू गो टू सी सम ऑफ हिज इमेजेस इन एलोरा एंड एलिफेंटा, वेयर द अर्लीस्ट इमेजेस ऑफ शिवा कैन बी फाउंड. एलोरा, एलिफेंटा, which is in Maharashtra, Bombay, Aurangabad, or in Parshurameshwar temple in Odisha, you find some of the earliest images of Shiva. And you'll find the images of Shiva, one image would be very ferocious, but always his one hand will be holding his wife gently on her chin, saying, don't be afraid. Ye drama hai. And I will show you those images. I'm not saying it's the beautiful images. Husband and wife chatting with each other. फिर रावण उनका पहाड़ को उठा रहा है सर के ऊपर. ये सब है. वहां पे कभी शिव जी को गुस्सा नहीं दिखा है. वो looks very calm and composed and he gets irritated and छोड़ दे, don't disturb me. So this is not, but the young man wants, उसका जो anger है, उसका frustration life का है, वो project करता है शिव जी के. And then of course young people like to smoke pot and weed, so they start seeing शिव जी also as a cool dude है.
Right.
And then you start imagining ये things about if शिव जी भी मेरे जैसे हैं, मेरा angst है शिव जी का angst.
Wow.
And you start projecting it and you're like, acha, this is good, this is great for your personal development, but can you just look at the art differently? तुमको निकालो, अपने आप को निकालो और मूर्ति को देखो ठीक से. Start seeing the image, start appreciating the image, and then you start seeing something totally different and you start saying, अरे ये तो अलग है, कुछ और बता रहे हैं. And then the story becomes interesting because your journey becomes, मुझे कहाँ जाना है? What is my journey? Where do I want to go? Do I want to be this muscular dude who is always angry? Or do I want to be a happy person?
Have you seen the new आजकल गाड़ियों के पीछे there's a specific face of Hanuman where he looks very menacing and very angry. It's an orange face that covers half the back. And my friend mentioned it. He's like, have you seen that? I was like, no. And he said the same thing. It's like Hanuman is now a very angry god that you can just see at the back. And जितने भी लोग होते हैं जिनको थोड़ी मारधाड़ वगैरह करनी होती है, weirdly enough they have that in the back. And like वो कार का स्टिकर बहुत पॉपुलर हो गया आजकल.
तो मैं जब ये देखता हूँ तो मुझे लगता है वो people say like I'm angry, so I'm like, अच्छा ये बेचारा आदमी है, बहुत ही सैड आदमी है लाइफ में. Because anger is a sign of helplessness. तो भी गुस्सा जिसको भी है ना, वो बेबस है. He's hang. तो you should always feel sad for him, sad for these angry people, because job नहीं है, लाइफ में सक्सेस नहीं है, वाइफ के साथ सक्सेस नहीं है, पेरेंट्स के साथ सक्सेस नहीं है, दोस्तों के बीच में सक्सेस नहीं है, उसको बहुत ही दर्द हो रहा है और वो दर्द, अपने दर्द से ये गुस्सा आ रहा है और फिर वो रुद्र बन जाता है. एंड ही स्टार्ट्स प्रोजेक्टिंग द वर्ल्ड एज इविल एंड ही स्टार्ट्स क्रिएटिंग दीज आर्टवर्क्स व्हिच रिफ्लेक्ट हिज ओन सॉरो. बट मंदिरों में जब हम बना रहे हैं मूर्ति, हम अपना नहीं बना रहे हैं. वी आर ट्राइंग टू से व्हाट द स्क्रिप्चर्स आर टेलिंग अस अबाउट द गॉड्स. That this is what you should look up to. So this is a political artwork which is designed to manipulate your thoughts. It is not spiritual artwork which is designed to elevate your thoughts.
But हम ऐसा भी तो बोल सकते हैं, the depictions of our gods change over time, right? किसी एक जमाने में, for example, being very fat or corpulent was considered to be a sign of fertility, right? And being slim or scrawny was considered to be like a sign of poverty because only some people could eat, right? तो हम ये भी तो कह सकते हैं कि if we started seeing very corpulent gods, then that's a projection of rich people of that time.
You see, let's look at the corpulent gods and we'll see how complicated these ideas are.
Okay.
Lakshmi is associated with wealth.
Yeah.
कभी उनको corpulent देखा गया है? मोटी लक्ष्मी आपने कभी पिक्चर में देखा है? क्यों नहीं?
Rather it's अलक्ष्मी.
हाँ, फिर वो अलक्ष्मी हो गई. अलक्ष्मी, उसको साउथ इंडिया में मुंह देवी बोलते हैं. मुंह देवी की मूर्तियां अगर आप देखें तो शी इज लुकिंग कॉर्पुलेंट बिकॉज उससे आलसपना भी दिखा सकते हैं. So it is not so simple. It is not that simple. If you want to approach it in a very logical way, अच्छा, अगर मोटापन वेल्थ के साथ जुड़ाया गया है, तो फिर लक्ष्मी को मोटी क्यों नहीं दिखाया गया है? एंड देन यू हैव द क्वेश्चन, अरे हाँ, ये भी सही है। सो नेवर एक्सेप्ट, थोड़ा सोचो, थोड़ा आस्क, फिगर, घूमो इधर उधर। गणेश जी को हम मोटे दिखाते हैं, आजकल गणेश जी को भी स्लिम बना रहे हैं लोग।
Really?
In Bombay, if you see some of the artworks, he's now becoming like Salman Khan, muscle body. Because लोगों को वो मोटा body, and then there'll be this one group saying नहीं नहीं नहीं, मुझे cute चाहिए, मुझे round चाहिए. But they are not asking, अच्छा ये मोटा क्या है, इसका मतलब क्या है? Why are they trying to communicate this roundness? And it is about fat and thin. Is it about our concerns, या उस जमाने में कुछ और बातें हो रही है? और समय के साथ what is consistent? What doesn't change with time? The human earning for happiness. ये नहीं बदलता है ना। 1000 साल पहले हैप्पीनेस होता था, अभी भी हैप्पीनेस है, उस समय भी प्रॉब्लम्स होते थे, आज भी प्रॉब्लम्स है। तो व्हाट इज नॉट चेंजिंग? सनातन, नॉट चेंजिंग, दैट इज द मीन। हिस्ट्री विल चेंज, ज्योग्राफी विल चेंज, मैटर विल चेंज, बट आवर नीड्स, आवर इमोशनल नीड्स डोंट चेंज।
Talking about happiness, Rishi Mugdala, as you mentioned in the book, says, I want a heaven higher than Swarg. And then there are roughly 3 classifications of heaven. One is Kailasa, the other is Vaikunt. मतलब मैंने तो वैसे सिर्फ स्वर्ग ही सुना था कॉमन पार्लेंस में. मैं बड़ा सरप्राइज हो गया कि ऐसे इसमें भी डिस्टिंक्शन है. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yes. So, in the Mahabharata, for the first time, we have this conversation जहां पे एक ऋषि होते हैं और ऋषि को इंद्र आके बोलते हैं कि आपने इतना अच्छा काम किया है, हम आपको स्वर्ग लेके जाएंगे। और वो बोलता है कि स्वर्ग में मैं हमेशा रहूंगा क्या? विल आई बी देयर इन हेवन फॉर एवर? एंड इंद्र कहते हैं नहीं, जब तक आपके अच्छे कर्म होंगे तब तक आप स्वर्ग में रहोगे, एक बार कर्म खत्म हो गया तो आप वापस आ जाओगे। He said, why will I come to a place where I have to stay for a temporary time? मुझे परमानेंट, लेकिन आजकल भी लोग बोलते हैं मुझे परमानेंट जॉब चाहिए। एंड वी आर टेरिफाइड कि शादी के बाद डिवोर्स से हम डरते क्यों है? क्योंकि वो परमानेंट, हमको बचपन में बताया गया था कि शादी परमानेंट है, एक बार शादी हो गई तो खत्म। बट अभी ये दुनिया बदल रही है, लोग बोल रहे हैं कि नहीं, डिवोर्स हो सकता है, देयर इज नो गारंटी। तो गारंटी वाली दुनिया हमको पसंद है, जहां पे हमको सुरक्षित महसूस होते हैं। तो फिर मुग्दला कह रहे हैं मुझे ऐसी दुनिया चाहिए जहां पे मैं हमेशा रहूं। एंड दैट्स द फर्स्ट टाइम यू फाइंड द स्प्लिट बिटवीन एन इम्परमानेंट हेवन एंड अ परमानेंट हेवन। तो स्वर्ग के साथ एक नया आ रहे हैं, एंड वी फाइंड दिस द महाभारत फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम। दिस आइडिया इज नॉट देयर बिफोर महाभारत। और फिर वो हेवन आता है तो एक ग्रुप बोलता है कि शिवजी का कैलाश पर्वत है, वहां पे जाना है, वहां पे परमानेंट है। फिर विष्णु ग्रुप आके कहता है कि नहीं नहीं, विष्णु वाला वैकुंठ है। नाउ व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द टू? तीनों में difference is very simple, and it all comes down to bhook and hunger. Remember, Buddha had once said कि desire is the cause of all suffering. ये sentence हमने सुना है। ये English translation है, it is a wrong translation. The word for desire that he uses in Pali is tanna, which means thirst. Tanha.
That changes everything.
And therefore, thirst, yearning. He's English में वो translate करते करते उसको desire बोल दिया, but it basically means जो भी yearning है तुम्हारे में, वहीं से दुख का शुरुआत होता है। तो हिंदुओं ने उसको आर्ग्यू किया कि नहीं, अच्छा ये ठीक है, लेकिन जब खाना मिलता है तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है। भूख लगी है तो आप बोलते भूख से दर्द होता है, तो भूख को मिटाने के लिए अगर मैं खाना दे दूं तो सुख आ गया। स्वर्ग ऐसी जगह है जहां पे खाना हमेशा रहेगा। So स्वर्ग is a place where all your desires are met.
Correct.
वो हो गया स्वर्ग। बट कितना खाना? खाना तो आता रहे, एक दिन खाना खत्म हो जाएगा। एक दिन आप you will get tired of the food, you want different kind of food, go wrong, तो स्वर्ग cannot be permanent। तो उन्होंने कहा कैलाश पर्वत, भाई कैलाश पर जहाँ शिवजी रहते हैं। Now the idea is, first let me explain the idea and then I'll show you the artwork, how the idea and the artwork relate. The idea is, अगर भूख मिट गई, if I can destroy hunger completely, then you don't need food at all. Imagine if you have no ambition, need, greed, want, नहीं है आप में, तो लाइफ तो कूल है यार, कुछ भी कर सकते हो, तो फ्री हो गया, कोई तुम्हें बांध के नहीं रख सकता, because you're not trying to impress anyone, you're not trying to show off, you don't want to prove to anyone, because तुम्हारे अंदर कोई डिजायर ही नहीं है। तो ये शिवजी के साथ जोड़ा गया। शिवजी, और इसलिए बोलते हैं शिवजी कैलाश पर्वत में रहते हैं, जहां पे पत्थर का माउंटेन मेड ऑफ स्टोन कवर्ड विथ स्नो। यहाँ पे कुछ उगता नहीं है. There is no plant. If there is no plant, it cannot sustain life. If it cannot sustain life, who can live in a place where there is no food? Someone who is not hungry. So Shiva is not hungry, so he lives on the mountain. And so happiness, permanent happiness will be there when you are not happy at all. Then comes Vaikunt. Vaikunt वाला नहीं, ये बहुत selfish लगता है. If you are not, what is the use of a person who doesn't want anything? उसके साथ दोस्ती भी नहीं कर सकते हम लोग, because he doesn't want my friendship.
Right.
So then they came up with the idea of Vishnu. And the Vishnu says, देखो, मुझे खाना नहीं चाहिए, लेकिन तुमको खाना चाहिए, तो मैं तुम्हें खाना दूंगा. So Vaikunt is associated with milk, ocean of milk. Shirasa, दूध का सागर. दूध का सागर में दूध is food. तो कैलाश पर्वत में खाना ही नहीं मिलता है, doesn't make a difference. But विष्णु की दुनिया में इतना खाना है, विष्णु को भूख नहीं लगती. He doesn't drink the milk, he gives it to others. And then you'll say, अरे अच्छा, very good, he's giving it to, I want to give him. मुझे भी देना है उसको खाना. मुझे, feeding people has its own joy. तो कृष्ण कहते हैं, ठीक है, you can feed me. मेरे को, I'll pretend to be hungry to make you happy. इसको हम लीला कहते हैं. Where you perform to make the other person happy, which we do in relationships with our lovers, with our parents, with our children. हम लोग एक्टिंग करते हैं ताकि उनको सुख मिले. अरे वाह वाह वाह, बहुत अच्छा काम किया है तुमने. एंड ये लीला बन गया. सो देन यू सडनली सी स्वर्ग, वैकुंठ, कैलाश, ये कॉन्सेप्ट्स कैसे निकलते हैं इंडिया में, इवॉल्व होते हैं धीरे 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 करके. आइडियाज, कॉन्सेप्ट्स, दिस आर सिर्फ Garud Puran, just by reading this one book, you suddenly start seeing, by using this one concept, death, कितना दुनिया खुल जाता है. राई का पहाड़.
Yeah, talking about death, where I live near Delhi, there are two kinds of rituals mainly in Hindus, cremation के अंदर. कुछ लोग चौथा बनाते हैं, कुछ लोग 13वीं बनाते हैं, डिपेंडिंग ऑन कास्ट, जो मैंने देखा जनरली. ठीक है, हमारे यहाँ पे 13वीं होती है, एक दो और कास्ट के यहाँ पे 13वीं होती है. हम बोलते हैं टिपिकली जो पंजाबी माइग्रेंट्स हैं वो चौथा बनाते हैं, राइट? एंड यू, आई डोंट नो इफ यू मेंशन 13वीं, इफ आई, अनलेस आई मिसरेड, बट यू डू मेंशन चौथा, राइट? एंड आई वाज वंडरिंग, कोई मेरे को समझा दे इन दोनों में डिस्टिंक्शन क्या है?
So चौथा and 13वीं are basically the end of the mourning period. Broadly it means the end of the mourning period.
Okay.
चौथा was, अभी आपने डेड बॉडी को क्रिमेट किया है, उसके बाद कुछ दिनों के बाद वो जो अग्नि है, the fire will die down and it'll become, then you go and collect the bones and the ashes and you उसका जो collection ritual है उसका चौथा दिन में होता है. तो चौथा, so that is the end of the ritual. और उसके बाद आप इसको समुद्र में डाल देते हो, नदी में डाल देते हो, कहीं पे डालते हो, the ritual is over. 4 दिन में खत्म हो गया. This is the, और यहाँ पे गुजरातियों में there is a बेसना ritual, बेसन, बैठ के you come to visit the people, कि वो 3-4 दिन लगते हैं, लोग दूर दराज से आते हैं relatives को मिलने के लिए. तो ये 4th डे में खत्म हो जाता है ritual. You come, you sit with the people who died. On that day, it is decided कि अगर कोई बड़ा घर, elder of the family has died, उसका वारिस कौन होगा. तो these things are decided. Practical issues भी होते हैं ना डेथ के. ये 4 दिन में खत्म हो गया. लेकिन जहां पे ब्राह्मणिकल कंट्रोल ज्यादा है, ब्राह्मण ज्यादा होते हैं, तो वहां पे रिचुअल्स गो ऑन फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम. और यहाँ पे रिचुअल उसे नवश्राद्ध कहते हैं. और नवश्राद्ध इनफैक्ट इट गोज ऑन फॉर अ ईयर ट्रेडिशनली, बट इसको रिड्यूस किया गया है 13 डेज. तो द फर्स्ट पार्ट ऑफ द रिचुअल्स इज प्रिपेयरिंग द प्रेत टू बिकम अ पितृ. तो वो 10 दिन का एक रिचुअल होता है, उसको नवश्राद्ध कहते हैं. उसके बाद एक, आफ्टर ही बिकम्स, ये जर्नी में पहला तो उसको एक शरीर दिया जाता है, विच टेक्स 10 डेज. शरीर देने के बाद उसका जर्नी, तो द फर्स्ट रिचुअल इज गिव हिम अ बॉडी, बिकॉज ही इज डेड, ही डजंट हैव अ बॉडी, यू हैव टू गिव हिम अ टेम्पररी बॉडी. स्टेप 1. Step 2, once he gets a body, he has to travel across a very long journey to reach Yamalok. इसमें 16 stations are there. ट्रेडिशनली ये 1 साल लगता था, आजकल इसे हम 12th डे में खत्म कर देते हैं. उसके बाद when he reaches यमलोक, फिर सपिंडकरण होता है. सपिंडकरण इज वेरी ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड फ्रॉम अ पितृ, प्रेत टू अ पितृ. ही बिकम्स एन एंसेस्टर, मतलब वो उस तरफ चला गया है. एंड ऑफ द जर्नी वो 13th डे में होता है रिचुअल. उसके बाद technically the dead person's spirit is not part of the world of the living. वो यमलोक पहुंच गए हैं, इसलिए आप उसका celebration करते हो एक श्राद्ध से, वो 13वीं होता है. So that is a very Brahminical ritual, while a Chautha is not a very Brahminical ritual. It is done by family and it doesn't involve the Brahmins. As I said, it's a caste thing. It's also economic thing because ये खर्चा बहुत होता है ना ये सब rituals में. So depending on which part of the world you come from, and these rituals change. पहले जमाने में it was 1 year ritual. अभी 13 दिन में सब खत्म हो जाता है. उसके बाद वो तीर्थ श्राद्ध करते हैं कि आफ्टर द 13वीं दे विल जस्ट डू अ तीर्थ, या तो गया में जाएंगे या काशी में जाएंगे, प्रयाग में जाएंगे, दे विल गो टू Kurukshetra. Different places are there where they will go and do the rituals next to a water body. Now, these are again Brahminical rituals.
Question. So when you were writing this book, how much of this was you actually traveling across India, across the place you live in, and observing death? Was that there at all? Or this is just a accumulation of the things you've seen over the years?
I have also performed these rituals for my father and my mother. So this is very much, my friends keep talking about Chautha and Tervi, and we realize North Indians use these words. South Indians never use these words.
What do they use?
They'll just say Shraddh and Shraddh Bhojan. And when you go to South India, North Indians are shocked that many South Indians bury the dead.
Even Hindus.
Even Hindus. Burial is a very common practice in South India. And in North India, it is limited to a very small group of people. But in South India, very rich people also bury the dead. Jayalalitha, when she died, was buried as part of what is called the Dravidian movement. But it is when those are political things. But generally, burial is a very common practice in many parts of India. In Rajasthan, the point where the kings would be cremated, they would build a chhatri, a memorial.
Correct.
This is not there in UP, Bihar, Odisha. Nobody in the Gangetic Plain would do this, but Rajasthan does this. When did they start doing this? During the Mughal period. Because the Mughals were building these huge tombs for their kings, though the Rajputs said, no, our landscape also should remember our kings, which is very against the Vedic idea of not remembering. You should not remember. That is a very important theme in the Vedic practices. Ki jo mare hue unko yaad. So this idea of, in fact, originally when photographs were, they said dead people's photographs should not be kept in the house because they will not go to the Pitralok. वो अटक जाएंगे यहाँ पे. आप उनको अपने याददाश्त से बांध के रखोगे. You will not liberate them. Remember the word moksha means liberation.
Correct.
How do I see? I'll give you a simple example. If you have a pet dog, the dog starts trapping you with its love. इतना प्यार देता है तुमको कि तुम कहीं नहीं जा सकते. और तुम हॉलिडे में, मेरे जो फ्रेंड्स हैं जिनके पास डॉग्स हैं, वो हॉलिडे नहीं जा पाते बिकॉज कुत्ता रोने लगता है और बांध के रखता है.
राइट.
तो उसका प्यार से वो बंधा हुआ है. वैसे ही हमारे प्यार से हम पूर्वजों को बांधते हैं. इसलिए हम then who are you helping? Are you helping yourself? Are you helping your relatives? Those who are dead. And they'll say, if you want to help your dead relatives, you have to let them go. छोड़ो. तो ये रिचुअल ऑफ नॉट क्रिएटिंग मेमोरियल्स, बट आजकल देखिए पॉलिटिशियंस जब मरते हैं तो उनके लिए मेमोरियल्स बनाए जाते हैं. दिस इज वेरी अगेंस्ट द ट्रेडिशनल हिंदू बिलीफ कि इनको छोड़ो, जाने दो. सो दिस, यू सी हाउ फिलॉसफी, आर्ट आर ऑल इंटरकनेक्टेड. Economics, politics, all interconnected.
In that same chapter, there are also multiple other ways in which you talk about how we remember the dead, right? ये तो एक चीज हो गई. ऐसे और भी something about, I believe, not the right word, totem poles, just a lot of things जिसके अंदर हम symbolically याद करते हैं. And you mentioned something about the Harappan civilization as well, how they did it, right? Is there any merit to these practices? I know you mentioned कि rituals बस perform किए जाते हैं, but is there any merit to these practices?
See, it depends on who you are and what you believe is there. If you don't believe, I'll give you a rational explanation. Let's talk.
Okay.
When you die, really, we don't know what happens after death. Nobody does.
Correct.
And technically, the dead body is like garbage. It has no purpose. आप इसको organs donate कर सकते हैं. फिर we can harvest the bones and the flesh to do certain things. हम उसको incinerator में लेके we can just give it to a recycling plant. लेकिन हम नहीं करते क्योंकि वो हमारे पिताजी का बॉडी है, माताजी का बॉडी है, नाना जी का बॉडी है, दादाजी का बॉडी है. We feel there is we get attached to it and therefore we perform ritual. अभी देखिए क्वीन एलिजाबेथ डाइड, इतना pomp and ceremony किसके लिए? She is dead, she is gone. ये सेरेमनी यूके के लिए है. बिकॉज यूके का रिस्पेक्ट दुनिया में चला गया. नोबडी रिस्पेक्ट्स यूनाइटेड किंगडम्स एनी मोर. पहले जमाने में वो विक्टोरिया के नाम में वो राम साम्राज्य, दे कंट्रोल द वर्ल्ड. आजकल उनका कोई वैल्यू नहीं है. तो अभी ये नाच गाना से उन्होंने ये बड़ा परफॉर्मेंस किया है, क्वीन को ऐसे हम करेंगे वैसे करेंगे.
नेशनल मॉर्निंग कर रहे हैं अभी.
Yeah, so her dead body also has become an object to for something else. It's a dead body. हाँ, जैसे इजिप्शियन सिविलाइजेशन में पिरामिड बनाते थे लोगों को बांध के रखने के लिए, यहाँ पे क्वीन एलिजाबेथ के लिए उन्होंने बड़ा सेरेमनी बना दिया. वैसे ही हमारे देश में भी जब कोई राजा मरता है तो इतना बड़ा सेरेमनी होता है लोगों को बांध के रखने के लिए. तो दिस इज नॉट अबाउट, सो यू नो दीज रिचुअल्स, देयर इज नो it depends on who you are as a person and how do you and your parents, do you have a honest conversation about death, what post cremation death rites? People don't have this conversation ki bhaiya mere like my mother and I had a conversation. She said when I die I don't want any rituals. She had actually kept cash in a box. She said ye cash istemal hoga for my funeral ceremonies, this is my will. So we had a very clean conversation about her death. We were not afraid of it. She said I've lived a full life. My father's death was sudden. Planning ही नहीं हुआ था कि suddenly हो गया, उनका हार्ट अटैक हो गया and we didn't, it happened so fast, it was a big shock. So we had no preparation. Here there was preparation. So my father's death and my mother's death, we handled it very differently. So it is up to us. How do you, if you're afraid of death, आप नहीं बात करोगे उसके बारे में, आप प्रैक्टिकल नहीं बनोगे, फिर आपको लोग फंसा देंगे कि देखो कुछ हो सकता है, फिर ये रिचुअल्स में बांध देंगे आपको. And you know, then the rituals become a burden rather than a liberation.
Correct.
And rituals are really meant to liberate you. कि वो दर्द से मुक्ति प्राप्त करने के लिए ये एक प्रोसेस बनाया गया है. And then you can choose and figure out how much you want to do and how much you don't want to do. And then figure out your life.
I also feel very liberated by death because my dad and I have had conversations about death since I was 15. And it's been 10 years now. So like in my head, I can rehearse if that happens. And might seem like a very daunting thing to people who are watching or listening right now कि ये क्या बातें कर रहा है, पर ये चीजें जरूरी होती हैं because it's best to be prepared for it. And the reason I mentioned that also is because in the end you mentioned कुछ लोग deliberately तैयारी करनी शुरू कर देते हैं डेथ की, है ना, कि वो मुक्ति धाम चले जाएंगे या कहीं और चले जाएंगे, right? Or like they start to have a looser grip on life, which I thought was very interesting. It's like a conscious acceptance of coming death.
See, this is like the moon, moon waxing and waning.
Correct.
Our life is also like, you know, it wanes, right? We are children and धीरे 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 करके शुक्ल पक्ष होता है, हम पूनम तक आते हैं. पूनम में when you feel that you have really lived, done whatever you are supposed to do in life, and then after that 50% the moon starts to wane कि अभी next generation को छोड़ दो चीजें. And this is something that we don't practice at a real level. But traditional society में कहते थे कि you have to prepare for death. And you have to keep, in fact, the preparation begins on day 1, but chalo, day 50 में डाल दो. या you know, do it whatever time, but you have to keep prepared. So then you start thinking of what do I want to leave behind? Do I leave behind wealth? Do I leave behind power? Do I leave behind knowledge? Do I leave behind emotions? क्या छोड़ते हैं? And this are explained in our scriptures in many ways to give us a framework so we can think better about these things, you know. And it is something that we don't, you know, when I read these books, I'll give you an example of it.
Sure.
जब वास्तु शास्त्र बात करते हैं तो बोलेंगे south, we told south is the area of death, right? What is north the area of? North is the direction of wealth, कुबेर. तो यमराज साउथ में होते हैं और कुबेर नॉर्थ में होता है. तो मैंने बोला अच्छा, मैंने हमेशा लिखता था. देन वन डे सेड ओके, कुछ तो रिलेशनशिप होगा ये दोनों चीजों में. एंड देन इट स्ट्रक मी, जब आप मरते हो आप सारा धन छोड़ के चले जाते हो. तो व्हाट यू लीव बिहाइंड गोज टू कुबेर एंड यू गो टू यमलोक.
इंटरेस्टिंग.
और वही आर्टवर्क में उन्होंने बनाया है. तो किसी ने हजारों साल पहले इसके बारे में सोचा और ऐसे फ्रेमवर्क बना दिया ताकि हम उसके बारे में विचार करें. And then we are like, oh, that's what's going on. They are making us think about these things so that we can live a better life, a better quality life.
Talking about death again, I've been fascinated by gods in other cultures. Greek mythology, काफी पढ़ी. I've played video games that have, you can play as Greek gods. In here, you mentioned several gods of death, right? One of them being Riti, and the other god is being Mrityu itself, which I thought was just a word. Right? Do all of these gods get the same treatment? Do they all perform the same functions? Is there a central story of death in all of them?
So, as I said, with history, new ideas come and go. Some last, some don't last.
Correct.
Yamraj as an idea lasts for a very long time. Mrityu, the goddess, appears only in Mahabharata.
Interesting.
और सिर्फ एक कहानी है कि ब्रह्मा को एक दिन देखते हैं कि nobody is dying and therefore decides to create a goddess called मृत्यु who will kill people. She starts to cry saying why should I kill people? मुझे दर्द होता है लोगों को मारने के लिए. और फिर ब्रह्मा उनको कहते हैं कि तुम नहीं मार रही हो, उनका कर्म ही उनको मार रहा है. तो ये स्टोरी सिर्फ एक बार मिलता है and there is no other mention of this goddess again. बट जब आर्टवर्क्स हम देखते हैं and artworks from the 9th, 10th, 11th centuries, we start seeing a goddess called चामुंडा. और चामुंडा गॉडेस वो हमेशा भूत प्रेत के साथ बैठी हुई रहती है, डेड बॉडीज के ऊपर बैठी हुई है. फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप एलोरा जाओ तो वहां पे एक बहुत ही फेमस मूर्ति है. एक तरफ लक्ष्मी बैठी हुई है, उसके बगल में दुर्गा बैठी हुई है शेर के ऊपर, और उसके बगल में एक बहुत ही भयानक देवी है जो डेड बॉडीज के पाइल के ऊपर बैठी हुई है. तो चामुंडा की ये मूर्ति है. ये मूर्ति बाद में पॉपुलर नहीं हुई. पीपल डोंट लाइक दैट स्टैच्यू एंड दे सॉर्ट ऑफ फॉरगेट अबाउट हर. बट चामुंडा की इमेज जो मिलती है विच इज एसोसिएटेड विद डेथ and with dogs and अंतड़ियां निकल रही हैं and it's all very macabre, जिसको कहते हैं विभित्स रस आता है. धीरे धीरे यही गॉडेस काली जो एसोसिएटेड, बट देन काली इज मोर एसोसिएटेड विद शिवजी. यहाँ पे शिवजी को इतना इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दिया जाता है चामुंडा की स्टोरी में. सो यू फाइंड दीज डिफरेंट आइडियाज इमर्जिंग. तांत्रिक ट्रेडिशन आता है जहां पे डेड बॉडी बिकम्स ए टूल थ्रू विच यू गेट मैजिकल पावर्स. तो फिर वो शव साधना की प्रैक्टिस होती है. ये प्रैक्टिस पहले वेदों में नहीं मिलता है ये सब आइडियाज. सो विथ हिस्ट्री एंड ज्योग्राफी न्यू आइडियाज इमर्ज, न्यू आइडियाज. और we should remember that Indians did not know reading and writing. Very few people knew reading and writing, but we could understand art. So they communicated ideas through art. तो हम लेखन मंदिरों में we never see any writing like in Egyptian. आप writing बहुत देखते हो.
Right.
हिंदू टेम्पल्स में यू सी आर्टवर्क्स के माध्यम से वो आपको पढ़ाते थे. So you find these different gods, so different gods, different concepts.
Yeah.
Nowadays in temples we don't find those artworks. Nowadays वो राधा कृष्ण की कहानी होगी थोड़ा इधर उधर. हम ये चामुंडा की स्टोरी नहीं देखते हैं ज्यादा, क्योंकि हमको नहीं डिस्कस करना ये पॉइंट्स.
ऐसा क्यों होता है कि see a lot of gods eventually become shunned in artwork in the temples? कि मतलब जो सेंट्रल गॉड्स होते हैं जो आप 10-5-6 उनके नाम ले सकते हो, मे बी थोड़े से रेयर अगर पहाड़ों वाली देवियां होती हैं उनको एक अलग सेगमेंट मिल जाएगा, वो भी कभी कभी लाइक इन माय लोकल टेंपल आई कैन अटेस्ट टू दैट. बट जनरली तो मतलब ये सारी चीजें आपको फिर यू फाइंड देम ऑन इंटरनेट फोरम्स, यू फाइंड देम लाइक इन दिस बुक, राइट? I still think that there is some merit to understanding the Shun gods. Maybe they don't have that many stories, but like Nirti, for example, I've been researching her through Vedic astrology only. I found it very fascinating because there were some parallels between her and Lakshmi as well.
So see, again, if you go to the Vastu diagram, again you have to look at the connections, and then to understand one god, you have to understand the gods around them. When you understand the gods around them, then one god starts making sense. So if you look at the southern direction, in the southern part, in the center is Yamraj. South east में अग्नि है, south west में नृत्ति है. Now, so south में you have these three gods: Agni, who consumes flesh; Yama, who then looks at the pret; and there's Nritti, who is the goddess of degeneration and decay. अगर आपने बॉडी को कंज्यूम नहीं किया है तो वो डीके करता है बॉडी को. So these are the three. She's associated with ghosts, भूत पिशाच. अभी डायगनली देखिए, यमराज के बिल्कुल ऑपोजिट कुबेर बैठे हुए हैं. I explained how the wealth and
right.
Now अग्नि का बिल्कुल ऑपोजिट है वायु. So नॉर्थ वेस्ट में वायु is sitting. वायु gives life, अग्नि takes life away. So fire प्राण है, breath. And Agni is what will consume your body. In the end, it will consume your body. So you suddenly see these opposites existing. One is life-giving, one is life-taking. And then you have Nritti ke opposite is Ishana Kon, northeast corner, where Shivji is sitting with a moon on his head. Regeneration, the principle of regeneration. Soma. Wow. So regeneration, degeneration. Life-giving breath, life-consuming flesh. Spirit, Yamraj, who looks at the spirit, what you leave behind is with Kuber. So just एक diagram के माध्यम से उन्होंने concepts explain कर दिया है. So Nritti deals with degeneration, decay, death, ghosts, and suddenly the ideas become interesting.
Okay. Two more things about interesting characters who don't get enough mentions. Dharm Dwaja, which I thought was a very interesting character, even though just you dedicated a paragraph to him, and Chandala.
So Dharmdhwaj is the doorkeeper.
Okay.
So just a doorkeeper. जैसे हर one of the very important things in Hindu mythology is they give a lot of value to doorkeepers. कि जब आप जा रहे हो तो हमेशा nowadays I don't know if you see many fantasy novels also, whenever they show them entering a gate there are always two gatekeepers and the
Correct.
gatekeepers talk to each other and normally they're opposite. They're very colorful characters.
Yeah.
जो अपने बात
No,
करते
even outside temples, they have like modern Darban ke statues. They
हाँ.
also represent the same thing.
And they're always flip images. They're flipped images. So one will have a left hand, the other will use the right hand. So in many ways, और उनके बड़े-बड़े दांत होते हैं. So even if you go to Tirupati Balaji temple, उनके बाहर जो मूर्तियां होंगी बिल्कुल विष्णु जैसे दिख, लेकिन उनके बड़े-बड़े दांत होंगे. Like remember the monsters we were talking about?
Correct.
बस दरबान हमेशा डरावना होता है. Anywhere you go, दरबान बहुत डरावना. Any new building you enter, the security person is always the most obnoxious person on earth. But his job is to keep people out and
Right.
to get certain things in. So he's a filtering. He's Pavitra. He is the filter. And he is filtering you. And that idea of the Darwan deciding who will enter Yamraj from which direction, north direction, south direction, depending on how you have lived your life, आपका segregation होता है. And that is what the doorkeeper does. He filters you. He filters you. And that's even today, अगर आप कोई government office में जाओ तो most powerful person is the secretary and the peon and the doorman. मंत्री तक पहुंचने के लिए कितने लोगों को manage करना पड़ता है.
Right. आपकी फाइल ऊपर जाएगी नीचे जाएगी पता
नीचे
नहीं
जाएगी वो
चलता है.
सब. इसलिए हमने in all these Puranic narratives, वो हमेशा देवी देवताओं के दरबार, they'll use the word darbar. This word emerged from the traditions. और पहले सभा होता था, सभा समिति होता था. So now you have this idea of दरबार. दरबार का दरबान होता है, और दरबान शिवजी के दरबान डोर कीपर्स होते हैं, विष्णु जी के डोर कीपर्स होते हैं, यमराज के भी डोर कीपर्स होते हैं. तो ऐसे. और जब चांडाल की बात होती है, see one of the things in India we don't like to talk about, it's very uncomfortable, is the caste system. And one of the unique features, although people say caste exists everywhere around the world, आजकल ये बहुत चालू है, they use the word caste very loosely. One of the key ideas of the caste system is the idea of purity. Shubh, ashubh. Shubh, ashubh. Or Indian tradition mein death is ashubh. Anything associated with death is considered to be extremely inauspicious. इसलिए मैंने कहा कि वो मेमोरियल्स नहीं रखना है, डेड अस्थि को दूर रखो. अस्थि सिर्फ शिवजी के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है. पहले जमाने में पीपल डोंट रियलाइज, महाकाल मंदिर जो उज्जैन में बहुत फेमस है, वो जो अस्थियां होती थी वो दे यूज्ड टू टेक इट फ्रॉम द क्रेमेटोरियम. तो फ्रॉम द लोकल क्रेमेटोरियम वो अस्थि लेके आते थे. अभी वो प्रैक्टिस बंद किया गया है. लोग बोलते हैं कि एक ही रिचुअल में यूज होता है, बिकॉज़ वी आर अनकंफर्टेबल विद डेथ.
राइट.
डेथ, और जो भी डेथ को मैनेज करता था, जो डेड बॉडी लेके जाता था, जानवर जब मर जाते थे उनको कौन निकालेगा बॉडी को. इन अ विलेज, इन अ प्रैक्टिकल रीजन है, कोई डेड बॉडी, एक buffalo has died, a dog has died, who will take care of the dead body? So one community was told, your job is to remove the dead bodies, you will cremate the dead, when I take the dead body you will manage the dead body. तो इनको लोगों ने चांडाल कहा, और कहा कि you are, while you are doing a good service, you are also considered to be dirty and therefore you will not enter the village. तुम अंदर नहीं आ सकते हो. So we started creating this hierarchy of purity, the pure and the impure. और इससे कास्ट का बहुत ही सबसे डार्क chapters of our culture, the one that Indian culture really gets cornered is the caste. और लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगता है बात करने के लिए, but I feel we should have this conversation because it helps us deal with it and then gradually get out of it. This mindset of purity and impurity. And that Chandal was the person who lived in the crematorium, who saw death, but he was also considered impure. और तांत्रिक ट्रेडिशन में कहते थे कि जो चांडाल होता है उसके पास सबसे ज्यादा नॉलेज होता है, because he sits and watches death every day. Unfortunately, उसका ये मतलब नहीं कि we gave respect to the Chandal. In our society, we treated the Chandal community in a very negative, as उनको छुओ मत, छुआछूत की बातें होने लगी, अछूत की बातें हुई. I thought this should be mentioned in the book, otherwise it will not be a good comprehensive book, which mentions that death, impurity और caste का एक relationship है, जो हम इग्नोर करते हैं.
उनकी जो फिजिकल डिपिक्शन है उसके अंदर दिखा रखा है, they have a spittoon that's also considered like something that I haven't seen in other places, right?
It is now these practices are not there, but traditionally up to the 19th century it is recorded that in certain villages, when a person of the who used to of a particular community would enter the village, he would be told you can only enter when the sun is at the height so that your shadow doesn't fall on the ground.
Oh my God.
Two, you will carry a pot in your neck so that अगर आपको थूकना है तो आप जमीन पे नहीं उसके अंदर थूकोगे. तुम्हारे पीछे एक ऐसे एक ब्रूम रखोगे, you'll keep a broom, झाड़ू रखोगे ताकि तुम्हारे जो पैर के निशान है वो भी मिट जाएंगे. So these kind of extreme horrifying things, we do get reference to it. अभी कहाँ हुआ, किस गांव में हुआ, we can argue, नॉर्थ में हुआ, साउथ में हुआ, ईस्ट में हुआ, वेस्ट में हुआ. But the fact is, this is recorded history. And it is part, there is a very famous Ketan Mehta movie called Bhavni Bhavai. Bhavni Bhavai is an old national award winning movie. I think Smita Patil had acted in it long ago by Ketan Mehta. उसमें ये बहुत डिटेल में दर्शाया गया है. Recently there was a film called Fandry, Fandry done in Marathi, which talks about this very beautifully. So ये जो सुअर रखते हैं वहां पे, तो in our country, you know, while the Muslims don't eat pork, Hindus also don't eat pork many a time because they say that it is associated with this community. They take care of this because they eat garbage. So ये जो हमारा सोसाइटी का एक डार्क साइड है, आई थिंक वी शुड एक्नॉलेज इट once in a while, little bit, so that वो धीरे धीरे करके हमारी सोसाइटी, you know, when you have awareness of something, it goes away. If you don't have awareness of something, it will grow, it will become more and more powerful. So if you want to destroy and get rid of the caste, you have to become aware of it and realize ये है क्या चीज, और उसको धीरे 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 करके अपनी दुनिया से तो निकाल लो. बात की सोसाइटी के बारे में तो पता नहीं है, लेकिन अपनी दुनिया से तो निकाल सकते हैं.
I agree. Talking about getting out of worlds, right? Just to finally mention something about, I really like this chapter. And I hold the gravity of the what you just said very seriously. But I have to say this because we have about 6 minutes before we ended. How to outsmart death. I thought you typically mention something like कि ठीक है भाई अब मरवर गए अब अपना वो करो. But no, there are passages. You can have Soma, Amritam, पतिव्रता हो सकती हो. मैं हैरान, मैंने कहा, so there are always ways out, like for immortality. That chapter was so interesting to me, and I was wondering like how you got that idea कि यार ये भी डाल ही देता हूँ.
देखिए, I don't know if in India, if you go to an astrologer, और आप एस्ट्रोलॉजर के पास जाओगे और वो बोलेगा कि देखो तुम्हारे राहु है, केतु है, ये है, वो है, आप पहले बोलोगे गुरुजी कुछ उपाय बताओ.
Correct. We look for remedies.
We want a bypass more than a remedy. We want a bypass. हाईवे है लेकिन वो bypass चाहिए. इंडियंस का वो बहुत बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है. And that is good and bad. It has positive side कि we don't, एक हाईवे बना दिया, अब यूरोप में जाओ, हाईवे का कोई बीच में नहीं आएगा. इंडिया में वो बीच में आ जाएगा, कहेगा कि देखो यहाँ पे गांव है, वहां पे गांव है, हम कैसे कनेक्ट करेंगे, हम ऐसे तो पूरा 90 किलोमीटर जाके यू टर्न तो नहीं लेने वाले.
Correct.
हम क्रॉस करेंगे. सो दिस इज ए, इंडियंस हैव ऑलवेज हैड दिस कांसेप्ट ऑफ उपाय, पगडंडी, कि राजमार्ग होता है, पगडंडी होती है. एवरीथिंग कैन बी बाईपास. नाउडेज वी यूज द वर्ड हैक फॉर इट. आजकल सब लोग हैकिंग कर रहे हैं. तो किसी ने सोचा हुआ है एंशिएंट टाइम्स में कि डेथ को हैक कैसे करेंगे, हाउ डू वी हैक डेथ, इज इट पॉसिबल टू लिव फॉरएवर. And आजकल people are trying to size, we have increased our lifespan so much in the last 50 years. तो पहले जमाने में वो स्टोरीज होते थे कि असुर तपस्या करके देवताओं से ऐसे वरदान मांगते थे कि वो they could outsmart death. या कोई ऋषि होता था जो सिद्ध पुरुष हो जाता है, he is able to conquer death. तो गोरखनाथ जी, मच्छिंद्रनाथ जी, जलेंद्रनाथ जी, these are nath yogis who are very popular in the 10th 11th century in the tantric period, who could outsmart death. The idea of outsmarting death, then Ayurveda came to outsmart death. ज्योतिष ट्रेडिशंस केम, ये मणि पहन लो तो आपको मृत्यु नहीं आएगी, आपको डिजीज नहीं होगा, एक्सीडेंट नहीं होगा. सो यू कैन लिव योर नेचुरल लाइफ स्पैन. इफ यू आर सपोज्ड टू लिव 10, इट विल नॉट बी कट शॉर्ट बाय डिजीज, इट विल नॉट बी कट शॉर्ट बाय एन एक्सीडेंट, इट विल नॉट बी कट शॉर्ट बाय डीके. The serpents apparently can actually remove old skin and put a new skin on. तो नागमणि आ गया कॉन्सेप्ट, नागमणि का कॉन्सेप्ट आ गया. सो यू हैव these many ideas in the scriptures which I thought I should share with people. You know, Siddha, Nagamani. Then there's also Chiranjeevi characters who live forever. And why do they live forever? Where did this idea come from? So my thesis is we were influenced by Chinese ideas, because Chinese always have the concept of immortals, 8 immortals. ये चाइनीज मिथोलॉजी में बहुत ही बड़ा कॉन्सेप्ट है कॉल्ड 8 इमॉर्टल्स. और मुझे लगता है कि हम चाइना से ट्रेड करते थे और वहां से आइडिया आ गया चिरंजीवी का. तो हमने कहा कि हमारे पास भी 8 इमॉर्टल्स है, तुम्हारे पास है तो मेरे पास भी है. और
और
हमने
हमने साउथ में स्टार भी बना दिया फिर एक।
so that's how it works. So that is the outsmarting death. Ki we want to hack life. We want to hack death.
Wonderful. Dave, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. I've been mesmerized. I've been up since 6 going at this for Kalbi. It's a wonderful book, and there is no one who comes close to explaining mythology in the way that you do. Thank you so much. Yeah. People can find the book on all websites. They can follow even Devdutt Patnaik. We'll link that up. The book, Garuda Puran, is out now, right?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.